Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us with the digital sector update. My name is Andy Pollard. I'm the Senior EPA Delivery Manager, and I'm joined today with Shay Boyd, who is our lead internal quality assurer for the Digital Marketer Standard.
Good afternoon, everyone.
As we go through this slide deck, which will probably take us around about an hour, we're going to be talking to you a little bit around Pearson's offer for standards, qualifications and endpoint assessments, touching on how to integrate EPA components into the on-programme, discuss what resources and support is available. Shay will then be touching on the endpoint assessment process within Pearson, and he'll also be touching on the dispensations for endpoint assessment and qualifications due to COVID-19. And then I'll be taking you through the digital content offer we have specifically for apprentices to develop and display their behaviours. So if we'll just start off with what our offer is. On the left hand side, you can see the on-programme qualifications that Pearson offer, which support the Digital Marketer Level 3. So we've got the Pearson BTEC Level 3 Award in Principles of Coding, Pearson BTEC Level 3 Certificate in Digital Marketing Business Principles, and Pearson BTEC Level 3 Certificate in Marketing Principles. Now, these qualifications are required as part of the Digital Marketer Gateway process. And to support our endpoint assessment offer, we have the Digital Marketer Level 3, the Network Cable Installer Level 3, and the Telecoms Field Operative Level 2. So in addition to these qualifications, we also have the on-programme qualifications for software development and infrastructure technician. So if we just touch for the next couple of slides what the endpoint assessment consists of for each individual endpoint assessment. So for digital marketer, there are 4 assessment methods. Now it's important to note that these assessment methods aren't discrete components. Ultimately, apprentices will be assessed on their submission of a summative portfolio, on a reference provided by the employer, on a synoptic project, and on their interview responses. And ultimately, the responses provided across these assessment methods will result in an overall grade. So with this endpoint assessment, these 4 methods contribute to an overall grade. And when we compare that to the Telecoms Field Operative endpoint assessment, these are at component level. So there are 3 components that make up the Telecoms Field Operative. This is a practical demonstration, a professional discussion, and a knowledge test. So for this endpoint assessment, apprentices will be assessed and will be graded at component level, which will then contribute to either a pass, fail, or a distinction. Similarly, for network cable installer, there are 2 components. So there's a practical demonstration and questions, and a professional discussion. Now, the difference with this endpoint assessment is the practical demonstration is the primary assessment method. Whilst apprentices are undertaking the practical demo, independent endpoint assessors can ask questions to support the achievement of particular grade criteria. Now, for full details on this endpoint assessment or the Telecoms Field Operative endpoint assessment or Digital Marketer endpoint assessment, we do have the specification and the EPA Resource Pack, and we're also starting with FAQ documents, so frequently asked questions. Those are all stored within ACE360 knowledge base, which we'll touch on a little bit later on. So when we're talking about planning for success, we've got some ideas that will help you. And when we're talking about success, we're talking about success in the broader apprenticeship learning journey context. Now, this all starts prior to enrolment. So before an apprentice completes their application form or enrolment form, we need to start looking in terms of what support, what advice, what guidance, what additional input is required for that learner to achieve. So having those conversations early, so in the pre-enrolment discussions, pre-enrolment meetings, use your initial advice and guidance documents, use the diagnostic tools for English and maths, and then set out a clear individual learning plan. Now, within the individual learning plan and commitment statements, share your expectations with employers. So employers are brought into the learning journey right from day one. As a training provider, what would you be expecting the apprentice to develop on? How will employers support that development? Have it all clearly laid out in an individual learning plan, so then everybody is clear in terms of what advice, what support, what development is required. Just as much as we do induction for learners, consider induction for employers. Are employers fully on board with apprenticeship standards? Do they know what roles and responsibilities they have? Do they understand the importance of gateway? As you'll be aware, with the apprenticeship standards, we've moved away from the training provider delivering all of the qualifications and the overall apprenticeship framework, and employers being involved at review points. With apprenticeship standards, employers should be there at every single stage to support, advise, clarify, and ultimately develop the apprentice that is within their organisation. Think about the integration of on-programme qualifications or on-programme training and how that links to endpoint assessment. So utilise the different guidance documents for endpoint assessment and start making those links early on within your curriculum planning. When we look at the Telecoms field operative, for example, the practical demo or the professional discussion, how can you support apprentices to become comfortable in demonstrating their skills and behaviours? Is it within your curriculum planning that at month 8, 9 and 10, professional discussions will form a key part of formative assessment? How can employers support you within that context? And then last but not least, plan and agree the 20% off the job requirements. So how will that be evidenced? Think about different skills that will enhance the apprentice. What informal learning can the apprentice undertake to benefit them and also to showcase their skills when they reach endpoint assessment? So within endpoint assessment, so we use a system called ACE 360. This system is not Pearson owned. However, we use it as the management information system to track and monitor all apprentices. Now, we talk about early engagement with apprentices for endpoint assessment, and the same again should happen for ACE 360. So we do encourage early registration onto the system, and this will help Pearson as an endpoint assessment organisation with capacity planning to make sure that we have sufficient independent endpoint assessors available for when your apprentice needs endpoint assessment. It also allows you to track and monitor progress. So within the system, it does show you which apprentices are in the training phase, gateway evidence being uploaded, approved for endpoint assessment, and ultimately when a grade has been awarded. Now, because we use ACE 360 as the management information system, this will allow you to access the EPA resources within the knowledge base. Now, Shay will touch on that a little bit later on. But ultimately, once your apprentices are registered for a particular standard, the knowledge base will unlock to allow you as the provider access to any supporting materials to help support the delivery of training and learning for that apprentice. And with all of the information being populated on AS360, it helps with resource planning. It will help you from a provider perspective in terms of making sure apprentices enter gateway at the predicted dates, but ultimately it helps Pearson sort of manage the workflow with regards to support for providers, employers, apprentices, ultimately leading to more timely assessment. So thinking now about the delivery of programs, where there is a tested component in the endpoint assessment, such as the Telecom field operative, consider the test content when delivering the on-program. Look at the sample assessment materials for the mock test. Use them as a basis to gauge how well or how informed the apprentice is. If there are any sort of technical areas that are assessed in the tested component, incorporate them into your workshops, your talk modules. Thinking about additional assessment methods, consider the use of professional discussions instead of written assignments, particularly where there's components which require an interview or a professional discussion. Having apprentices work through a professional discussion or an interview will help develop their skills, their confidence, which will lead to them being more confident within the endpoint assessment. As part of the on-program delivery, whilst you as the provider or the employer are undertaking observations, link the competency criteria to any endpoint assessment observed criteria. Start to develop the links with regards to what are we doing on program which will support us within endpoint assessment. One key thing to note is at the very start of an apprentice's learning journey, share with them the specification, the EPA Resource Pack, and any supporting materials. Ensure that apprentices and employers are well aware of the expectation. So within our resource pack, we will detail the grade criteria, what apprentices need to demonstrate to achieve a pass or a distinction or a merit, and use that all the way through the apprentice's 12, 15, 18 months on program. Consider that endpoint assessments are graded. So we've moved away from the traditional pass-fail competency-based qualifications to either a pass distinction or a pass merit and distinction. Looking at the different grading, and we have an example a bit later on, think about assessor standardisation. How can you use pass criteria to standardise your assessor's assessment decisions? What evidence will be required for a distinction, and how can assessor standardisation support you in the delivery of apprentices' learning? Avoid any dilution of the criteria, because during endpoint assessment, Pearson's independent endpoint assessors will use that grade criteria as a requirement to confirm, yes, the apprentice has achieved a pass or a merit or a distinction. One of the things to consider is during endpoint assessment, no inference can happen. So just because an apprentice can demonstrate a work product, that doesn't necessarily mean the apprentice has the knowledge, the skill, or the behaviour that sits behind it. And then finally, so last but not least, continue practicing. Utilise the EPA assessment components and try and mirror them within the learners on program. So when learners do get to endpoint assessment, it becomes normal. So thinking of professional interviews or professional discussions, consider using another person that is unknown to the apprentice to undertake the discussion or the interview. Try and replicate as much as possible what the apprentice will be experiencing in endpoint assessment beforehand. Within our resource packs, we have got learner checklists and suggestions for self-assessment, which again will be there to support the apprentice to make sure that they are as well prepared and as confident as possible. So as I mentioned a couple of moments ago, what we've got here is an example of a digital marketer. Now remember, I mentioned that we have 4 assessment methods, which when fully assessed will result in an overall grade being awarded. This extract is taken from the EPA Resource Pack, and as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got the standard. So this will be a replication of what is on the assessment plan. We've then got a column for minimum requirements for competency. Then we've got a reference for the independent endpoint assessor to indicate where the standard has been met. The justification for the independent endpoint assessor, and then the optional interview questions. So if we just take standard A1, so that's in the communication area, applies a good level of written communication skills for a range of audiences and digital platforms, and with regards to the sensitivity of communication. So the minimum requirement to confirm that the apprentice has the competency is the apprentice must be able to demonstrate communicating across 3 different platforms to 3 different types of audience or customer segments. One of these should be a form of internal communication. So that is giving you an indication of what the apprentice must be able to evidence. In this case, it's been evidenced in the portfolio, and then when the independent endpoint assessor reviews, they have to provide their justifications. And to prepare for the interview, the independent endpoint assessor will identify and collate a range of questions just to clarify or to further develop the evidence that's being presented. One thing to bear in note is that there is no hidden grade sheets or mark sheets. Independent endpoint assessors have access to the same documentation you do at a provider level. So if the requirements for competency or the evidence requirements require 3 different platforms to 3 different types of audience or customer, then that is what the independent endpoint assessor will be looking for. So there is no hidden sort of assessment criteria. Within endpoint assessment, we do use command verbs, and again, to support your apprentices, encourage and promote the depth of evidence that is required. So I'm not going to go through each of the different verbs, but these are just snapshots and examples of the common verbs used in endpoint assessment. 2 of the main ones that we use across the level 2 and level 3 endpoint assessment is describe and explain. So as you can see, the definition of a description is to give a clear account in the apprentice's own words, including all relevant information, and in some cases applies that knowledge to a given context. When we look at that in line with an explanation, that is taking the apprentice one step further. So the apprentice, for an explanation, can provide details and reasons. Now, reasons can be positive, negative, but it's showing the breadth of knowledge and understanding to meet the explained command verb. So we do have a range of resources and support. So we've got the qualification specifications. So as I mentioned previously, once you have learners registered on ACE360, you will have access to the knowledge base. Within the knowledge base, you will find the specification, EPA Resource Packs, and for the digital marketer, we've got mapping and tracking documents, synoptic resources, one-page overviews of synoptic briefs. We've also got the gateway declaration form and the authentication and certification form, which is required for gateway purposes. In addition, we've got the CRM support. So that is Pearson's customer service portal, where you can raise a query and it will be redirected to the relevant team. So if you're thinking of on-program support, you would indicate on the CRM on-program support and which qualification in particular. We do have senior standards verifiers. So senior standards verifiers relate to on-program qualifications, whereas within endpoint assessment, we have lead internal quality assurers who will be there to support, advise and guide. And similarly, we have got newsletters that go out quite regularly. So there are EPA specific ones. There are also VQ bulletins and also apprenticeship insights. Now, one thing to bear in mind is if you are not receiving these, you do need to request to opt in for updates. So in line with GDPR, we're unable to send sort of newsletters, bulletins and communications unless you're giving us express consent. Okay, so at this point, I'll hand over to Shay.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to take you through the areas that are associated to the Digital Marketer Level 3 apprenticeship. So first of all, if we look at the flexibility that exists around functional skills, the rule requiring Level 2 apprentices to study towards and attempt Level 2 functional skill assessments is temporarily suspended. This will allow your apprentices, employers, training providers and EPA providers to focus on other key requirements for completion of a Level 2 apprenticeship. Main providers should retain evidence if any apprentice did not take the Level 2 assessment due to coronavirus. A Level 2 apprentice will still require a Level 1 functional skills in English and or maths in order to complete the apprenticeship. The temporary suspension applies to both apprenticeship standards and frameworks. Flexibility around digital marketeer. Employers can request that an EPAO permission to allow apprentices to take the project at home, rather than invigilating being required at the employer's premises. Let's look at the EPA journey. Andy's covered off how ACE360 works in general with Pearson. I'm going to take you through how this is going to work from a digital perspective. ACE360 is our online platform enabling providers to register your apprentices in readiness of EPA. What it will allow for is seamless process through all key stages of the EPA journey. So you're going to have clear visibility of the apprentice's stage. It enables booking and scheduling at times convenient to the apprentice and supports assessments and results process. And it will also enable certification claims direct with the ESFA. When we look at the resources for digital marketeer, the specification that we work towards currently, we have an EPA Resource Pack. We also have additional resources which are apprentice focused, which focuses against segments against each component of the EPA. And the core aim is to provide guidance, instruction and resource to all key stakeholders. So there is sample assessment material, which will provide an indication of what to expect from the knowledge test, and there are portfolio evidence logs. ACE 360 will provide guidance and documents on how to use the system to enable that EPA process. And from a knowledge-based point of view, that's where all of the resources can be found, everything from sample assessments and grading criteria and specifications. Taking a quick look at the resource pack, in preparation for EPA, we need to consider certain things. We need to consider what's the best way from a preparation point of view, and that really is to familiarise yourself with the requirements that are going to be judged as part of significantly above the standard outcomes before you start the EPA. From a holistic point of view is the way that our team will go about assessing all apprentices that we work with. So we are looking to gather as much evidence across all of the portfolio to map that against all of the outcomes that we want to see clear evidence versus criteria. So we have holistic grading, we have employer reference. Now this is obviously completed by the employer at the end of the apprenticeship. And what we're looking for there is for the employer to be specific. If they can detail exact projects that the learner took part in, if they led on it or if they work as part of a team, what digital tools did they use? What were the objectives that they achieved or were trying to achieve? How did they integrate with other parts of the business or external stakeholders or clients? Anything of that nature that can be detailed in an employer reference, an assessor can look at and map quite clearly against criteria. The second method we look at is summative portfolio. Now, towards the end of on-program training, what we would look for you to do is to develop a summative portfolio, which is work-based evidence generated in the workplace. And the reason why this is useful from an assessment point of view, it allows the apprentice to potentially select between 2 or 3 pieces of work and select the best piece of work which maps against the standard criteria. And it also allows us to focus the apprentice's attention towards all of the what criteria. And if the summative portfolio can be developed with that in mind, that gives us a strong base to look at all of the evidence. And it also helps the assessor to start to consider the other 2 areas that they'll have to work towards, which is the with whom and how criteria. And that's the way we look at the main structure of the EPA Resource Pack as a resource. Okay, so countdown to EPA, what happens next? So from a gateway perspective, when the learner is at gateway, we are looking to see English and Maths level 2, we're looking to see principles of coding, we're looking to see marketing principle certification and digital marketing business principles. For Telecoms field operator gateway, we're looking at English and Maths level 1, English and Maths level 2 attempted, and a portfolio of evidence. Network cable installer gateway, again, English and Maths level 2 and a portfolio of evidence. Gateway principles, completed documentation must be uploaded into the apprentice record and relevant component box. Once all of the gateway evidence is uploaded, the provider is required to confirm gateway. Pearson will then allocate an independent endpoint assessor who will review the gateway evidence and confirm the apprentice is approved for EPA. The provider can then request an EPA at a date which is suitable using the booking tool on ACE 360. We also see some reporting data from ACE 360, so we can see how many people have been approved, how many people are ready, how many people are in progress, and whether gateway has been determined for evidence for other learners. So we get a running report of apprentices that we're working with through ACE 360 as a reporting tool for us. We can see things like grade distribution, so we can check how many learners have come through Gateway, have gone through full EPA, and then how are they being mapped across fail, pass, merit and distinction grading. And that will give us an idea of how our assessors are delivering their EPA assessments, and if we start to see patterns in grades, that gives us something we can feed back on as a team and learn from. Just briefly, I want to go over the role of the EPA Assessor. So first of all, as I've mentioned, they're going to be responsible for the overall EPA journey post-Gateway. So after they've selected and confirmed evidence meets the criteria that I've outlined, they will then directly contact the learner by email to set a date for the assessment planning meeting. This is an important meeting for the learner, and it's where the assessor and the learner will discuss which synoptic project is the best project for them to undertake before they move to their final EPA. And what the endpoint assessor will consider is where the apprentice is currently working, what industry, what tasks do they carry out in digital marketing? Can they see synergies between one of the briefs and an area where the apprentice has gained knowledge and can apply skills and show that they have a project where they can really showcase all of their skills. During that meeting, the assessor and the learner will agree and discuss the projects, and then it will be down to the endpoint assessor to then send a full brief to the apprentice by email. They will also look to understand when the learner will carry out that assessment. That's a 4-day assessment, so the assessor will make notes on when that's going to be undertaken, and that can be taken at the training provider's premises, or again, something I mentioned earlier regarding COVID allowances. Learners can actually undertake the project at home across an agreed 4-day period as well. So once that's been undertaken, that project would then be uploaded directly into ACE by the training provider, and the assessor will be notified that that's there, and they can then look to start marking that ahead of the final EPA assessment date. When we get to the final EPA assessment, what we are looking to do is to undertake a full interview, which will last generally sometime between an hour and 15 minutes. And the normal criteria for interview process is undertaken. So we want the learner to be somewhere in a secure environment where they're not going to be disturbed for that time frame. We want them to have a computer with a webcam. We want them to show us ID. And then we really want to get them comfortable, and then start to ask them questions which you've seen in some examples in the outline earlier that are related specifically to all of the evidence that apprentice has created throughout their learner journey. So we are really looking to understand where exactly we can qualify evidence or find more evidence through bespoke questioning. Once that assessment is finished, the recording would be uploaded to ACE 360. It would go through our quality assurance process, and then we're looking to provide assessment results within 5 working days of the EPA assessment. How can we help the learner create a great portfolio? Well, from anything from 10 weeks to 6 months from EPA start, as I mentioned, we really, and this is an I-8 need as well, we're really looking to try to get the apprentice to develop a portfolio which is work-based products, which maps against criteria and the what criteria. That evidence can be created in a PowerPoint, PDF, or a Word format with screenshots, all related to criteria and mapped clearly. If we look at 2 areas, on program and endpoint assessment, you can see that what we're starting to do is to really to develop areas around endpoint assessment in relation to developing a summative portfolio, developing a synoptic project, looking at an employer reference, and putting all of those things together for us to then make final decisions post-interview. What to expect during endpoint assessment. From a planning meeting point of view, we're really looking to confirm things like logistics for the EPA assessment, discuss synoptic briefs and agree a suitable brief. We can offer answers to the learner at that stage if they have any concerns about how the endpoint assessment is going to work or what they're going to be required to cover from a synoptic project. Our independent endpoint assessors will also provide resources in the form of the EPA Resource Pack to the learner to help them prepare fully for the endpoint assessment. On the assessment day itself, the assessor and the learner will undertake a pre-assessment briefing. The interview component, we aim to hit around an hour, give or take 10%. No feedback will be provided on the day, and quality assurance process will be followed post that interview, where the quality team will look at all of the areas of the evidence. And post-assessment, endpoint assessors will not be able to provide any additional support or feedback. This has to come through directly from the delivery team at Pearson. Results and certification. All endpoint assessment results will be made available on ACE 360, 5 working days after the EPA assessment. Pearson are responsible for claiming the overall apprenticeship certificate from the SFA, and this will be sent to the employer listed within ACE 360. Apprenticeship support. I'll hand back to you, Andy.
Thanks, Shea. So when we're talking about apprenticeship support, we've got a dedicated web page which details the on-programme qualifications and the apprenticeship standards. Within this landing page, you will start to see additional standards that Pearson are offering will start to populate up. So what we've got here is an overview, advice and support. We've got case studies and the independent apprenticeship policy group. Within the advice and support section, we've got a range of webinars, videos, frequently asked questions, which are aimed at different groups of providers. So some, if you are new to endpoint assessment, there is a webinar recording available. If you're experienced, there is a webinar available to you. And if you are looking for steps to success or any changes to assessment plan versions, we've got webinars there for you. In addition, you've got your sales teams who will be able to advise on the onboarding process or if there are any contract amendments. But in addition, we've also got the Learning Hub, which is primarily aimed at behaviours and support material which has been produced by the School of Marketing. So Learning Hub is a separate platform which can support learners with 20% off the job training, and it will help to upskill or even reskill your employees, your apprentices in soft skills. So there are 13 self-directed learning programs, and there are a couple of examples on the screen, such as decision making, managing on personal performance, adaptability, and accountability. Within the digital content space, we do have digital learning content to support the delivery of the digital marketer. In addition, it's there to be used as a blended offer. So there are elements which you can use for self-directed learning, or if you're delivering sessions using remote methods, you can utilize that content and use it to support the on-program phase. So what we'll do, we'll just pause there Just like to thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to contact us.